They asked me later what I said when I found her on that floor. They wanted a scream, a curse, something they could repeat at church on Sunday. I didn't give them one. I gave them silence, and by the next morning, silence had cost my son more than he ever imagined it could. Welcome back. If you're new here, settle in, because this one runs deep. If you've been with me before, you already know what silence from a quiet man can do. Let's begin. My name is Walter Doyle. I'm 61 years old, and until 11 days ago, I would have told you my family was steady. Not flawless. Nobody's family is flawless. But steady, the kind you build slowly, brick by brick, over 32 years of marriage and one son you'd have walked through fire for. My wife's name is Margaret. 32 years together, and I still remember the sound of her laugh from across a crowded room, like it was the only sound in the world. My son Caleb is 28. Good job, good manners, the kind of young man people compliment you on at gas stations. 2 years ago, he married a woman named Renee. Her family is the Hales. Her father, Russell Hale, shook my hand at that wedding with a grip a little too firm and a smile a little too wide. Something in me flagged it immediately. I ignored the flag. That was my mistake, and I own it. 11 days ago, I flew out to Charlotte for a 3-day supplier meeting. Standard trip, I take 4 or 5 a year. Everyone knew I was going. What nobody knew was that the final meeting got canceled on day 2. I could have stayed, ordered room service, watched the game alone in a hotel bed. Instead, I booked an earlier flight home. I wanted to surprise Margaret, 32 years married, and surprising my wife still felt like the best part of my week. I landed a little after 2 in the afternoon, grabbed my bag, and drove myself home. And here's the detail I need you to hold on to, because everything after this hinges on it. When I turned onto our street, Russell Hale's black truck was parked in my driveway. Not on the curb. In my driveway like it belonged there. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe they'd stop by for lunch. People do that. I parked behind it, walked to my own front door, and heard 2 different houses existing under one roof. From the kitchen, laughter, easy, relaxed, the sound of people with nowhere else to be. From the living room, a silence so wrong it stopped my hand on the doorknob. I pushed the door open, and what I saw on that living room floor is the reason none of them are speaking to me now, and the reason I don't regret a single thing I did next. Margaret was on the floor, not lying down, not resting, collapsed against the base of the couch, her legs folded wrong beneath her, her right hand pressed hard under her nose. Her cream blouse had a dark stain spreading across the collar that I recognized before my brain even let me name it. Blood. Her eyes found mine the instant I stepped through that door. In 32 years, I had seen my wife cry at movies, at weddings, at old songs on the radio. I had never once seen her look at me the way she looked at me in that moment. Like she'd been holding a door shut with her whole body, and the second she saw my face, she finally let it swing open. Like she'd been waiting for permission to stop being strong. I did not panic. I want that understood clearly. I dropped my bag where I stood, got down on one knee, and called 911 with a steadiness that surprised even me. While the dispatcher walked me through checking her pulse, while I wiped blood from my wife's face with my bare hand, I could still hear it. Laughter. From my kitchen. My 28-year-old son, my daughter-in-law's father, and her mother, laughing like they were at a backyard barbecue, while Margaret bled 12 feet away from them. Sit with that for a second. I had to. The paramedics arrived in 9 minutes that felt like 9 years. 2 of them, fast and calm the way people are when they've seen the real thing before. The lead paramedic, a young man named Ortiz who couldn't have been past 30, looked up from the blood pressure cuff with an expression that told me the news before he opened his mouth. "Mr. Doyle," he said quietly, "your wife is in hypertensive crisis. This pressure doesn't spike like this out of nowhere. This has been building for hours. She needed help before this point." He said it clinically, without blame. I looked toward the kitchen, where the laughter had finally stopped. And something inside me that had been hot and frantic went very still. Cold, almost. I held Margaret's hand until they lifted her onto the stretcher. She squeezed my fingers twice. Our signal, since the year we got married. I squeezed back twice, stood, straightened my jacket, and turned toward the kitchen. Understand something about me before I go further. I don't raise my voice. I don't throw things. I have never once made a scene in my own home. But I am a man who handles what needs handling, and it was time. If this story is landing for you, hit subscribe before we keep going. It genuinely helps this channel more than you'd think, and I want you here for what comes next. I had walked into boardrooms holding my career in the balance. I had walked into hospital rooms holding people I loved. But nothing had ever felt like walking into that kitchen. The laughter was gone, switched off like someone had found the exact right button. 3 people sat around my kitchen table, surrounded by plates of food and glasses of iced tea, like they'd just wrapped up a pleasant Tuesday lunch. In my house, while my wife bled on my floor. I stood in the doorway and said nothing at first. I've learned in 61 years that the most dangerous thing a furious man can do is slow down. Every instinct screams at you to raise your voice, to move fast, to make people feel the size of what they've done. But slow is worse for them. Slow means you've already decided the outcome, and nothing they say will change it. Caleb stood up the moment he saw my face. I'll give him that much, some part of him already knew. "Dad," he started. I held up one finger. He stopped. I turned to Russell Hale first. Silver hair, permanent tan, the posture of a man who'd never taken an order in his life. His hands were folded on my dining table, like he was chairing a meeting he'd been invited to. I looked at him for a long moment, then said, in a voice so calm it probably scared him more than shouting would have, "Get out of my house." His wife Diane set down her tea. Caleb opened his mouth again. "Dad, just let me. I'm not talking to you yet." Still calm. Still slow. "Get out of my house. Both of you. Right now." Russell tried what men like him always try, reason delivered slowly, like it was a gift. "Walter, if we all just take a breath." "I didn't ask for a breath. I asked you to leave." "I won't say it a third time." Diane grabbed her purse, touched her husband's arm, gave him the look wives give when they mean not now, not here. Russell stood slowly, the way men do when they need you to believe they're leaving by choice. As they crossed the living room toward the door, they saw her. Margaret on the stretcher, oxygen mask over her face, and for already running, 2 paramedics working in calm, practiced motion around her. Diane stopped walking entirely. Her hand flew to her mouth. Russell went stone still, staring at the woman whose blood was still faintly visible on her collar. Good. I needed them to see that. I needed it burned behind their eyes for the rest of their lives. They left without another word. The front door clicked shut, and the house went quiet in a way it had never been quiet before. Just me and my son now. He stood at the kitchen table, jaw tight, hands at his sides, his mother's eyes doing the thing they do when they can't decide between shame and defense. I sat down across from him, folded my hands, and said 2 words. "Sit. Talk." What came out of his mouth over the next few minutes would rearrange everything I thought I understood about that afternoon, and about my own son. He exhaled first, dragged a hand down his face, and started talking. "I want you to stay close here, because this is where the story stopped being about a medical emergency and became about something much colder." Russell and Diane hadn't dropped by. They'd been planning the visit for nearly a month, waiting specifically for the week I'd be out of town. They came with documents, real paperwork, related to a piece of land I've owned for 17 years, a small lakeside property out past Miller's Ridge that I'd always told Caleb would be his one day, when the time was right. Russell had decided the time was right now. His plan, as Caleb finally laid it out, was simple and ugly. With enough pressure applied gently over a shared meal, Caleb could be talked into signing paperwork that would transfer partial control of that land into a holding company Russell managed. While I was 300 miles away, without my knowledge, without my signature, I kept my face still. Inside was an entirely different story. "And your mother," I said quietly. "Where does she fit into this?" Caleb looked at the table like it might answer for him. She'd walked into the kitchen about 40 minutes after they arrived, overheard enough to understand exactly what was happening, and she was not having it. 32 years, and I know precisely how she gets when something crosses a line. She told Russell directly that the land wasn't Caleb's to sign, that I hadn't agreed to anything, that they were out of line showing up like this behind my back. Russell talked over her. She got louder. He got louder. Back and forth for several minutes, until she suddenly stopped mid-sentence. She said her head was pounding, Caleb said. That she felt dizzy. She went to sit in the living room and I was going to check on her. I swear I was going to, but Russell started talking numbers again, and I got pulled back in. And I got pulled back in. And I got pulled back in. He couldn't finish the sentence a third time. He didn't need to. I sat with it in silence long enough to hear the paramedics' low voices from the next room, the wheels of the stretcher rolling across my hardwood floor. "So let me understand this correctly," I said, and my voice had changed enough that Caleb straightened in his chair. "Your mother told your father-in-law in her own home that he was out of line." He talked over her. It escalated. She told you she felt unwell. And you went back to the kitchen. Silence. You went back to the kitchen, I repeated, laying it flat between us like something neither of us could pick up. Dad, I didn't know it was serious. She's had high blood pressure for 5 years, Caleb. 5 years. A paramedic who met her 20 minutes ago understood the danger faster than her own son did. I stood up, and what I said to him next is the reason he hasn't slept in my house since. I don't know who raised the man sitting in this kitchen, I told him, but it wasn't the version of me I thought you knew. I didn't wait for a response. I picked my keys back up off the counter and followed the stretcher out to the ambulance, leaving my son standing alone at a table still covered in someone else's iced tea glasses. The hospital was the kind of quiet that presses on your chest. I sat in a hallway chair for 3 hours while machines did what medicine does, while nurses moved past me with careful, practiced eyes. Around 8 that evening, a doctor finally told me Margaret was stable. Her pressure had come down. She'd need to stay overnight for monitoring, but she was going to be fine. I walked into her room, and she was propped up against 2 pillows and 4 taped into the back of her hand, looking smaller than I had ever seen her look. She reached for me before I'd even reached the bed. I heard you, she whispered. Downstairs. I heard you tell them to leave. You heard all of it? Enough of it. Her hand tightened around mine. Walter, there's something you don't know yet. Something I found before Russell ever showed up. That got my full attention. 2 weeks earlier, while I was traveling, Margaret had gone looking for our old tax folder in Caleb's garage, where we'd stored boxes since our move. Instead, she found a manila envelope tucked behind a stack of Caleb's college textbooks, paperwork with Russell Hale's name on it, dated 8 months back, and a filing history connected to 2 other properties in neighboring counties. Both had belonged to elderly relatives of women Russell's sons-in-law had married into. Both had quietly changed ownership within a year of the marriage. She hadn't told me because she wanted proof, not suspicion, before she brought it to me. She'd been quietly digging for 2 weeks, planning to lay it all out for me the moment I landed from Charlotte. Russell Hale hadn't discovered an opportunity with our family. He'd built a pattern with it. Caleb doesn't know any of this, Margaret said. I don't think he understands what kind of man he married into. I sat there holding my wife's hand in a hospital bed and felt the entire shape of the afternoon shift beneath me. This wasn't one bad decision by an overwhelmed son. This was a method, a rehearsed one. And somewhere across town, Russell Hale was almost certainly telling his daughter a very different version of what happened in my kitchen today. I had one more visit to make before this was over, and it wasn't to my son. I left the hospital at 10 that night with Margaret's blessing and her folder in my jacket pocket, and I drove, not home, but to the county records office parking lot, where I sat until it opened the next morning. What I found took less than 2 hours and confirmed everything Margaret suspected. Russell Hale had, over the past 6 years, been named on 3 separate property transfers involving in-laws of his daughters. 2 of the 3 properties had since been sold through an LLC registered at Russell's own business address. The third, a small rental duplex belonging to an elderly uncle of his youngest daughter's husband, had been transferred 11 months after that marriage and sold 4 months after that. This wasn't a father-in-law overstepping out of enthusiasm. This was a pattern with a track record, and my son had nearly become Chapter 4. I called a lawyer I trust, a woman named Priya Chandra, who has untangled uglier things than this for me before. I laid out everything, the visit, the paperwork Russell brought, the county records, the pattern. She listened without interrupting, then said the sentence I needed to hear. Walter, nothing was actually signed. That's the good news. But you need this documented and on record now, both to protect the property and to protect Caleb, because if this man tries again with cleaner paperwork, you want a paper trail proving intent. We spent the afternoon building exactly that. Notarized statements, copies of the county filings, a formal letter to Russell Hale's business attorney, making it unmistakably clear that any future attempt to secure signatures related to my property, through my son or otherwise, would be treated as attempted fraud, with documentation already prepared to support it. I didn't do this out of vengeance for its own sake. I did it because a man who has done this 3 times doesn't stop on his own. Someone has to be the one who stops him. By the time I got home that evening, Caleb was sitting on my front porch steps in the dark, waiting. He'd been calling all day, and I hadn't answered a single one. Dad, he said, standing as I approached. I talked to Renee. I told her everything. What her dad tried to do, what I let happen with Mom. She didn't know either of those things. She's furious at him too. I studied my son's face for a long moment under the porch light. Something in it had changed since yesterday. Something had cracked open. Sit down, I told him. There's more you need to know about the man your wife's father really is. And then you and I need to decide what kind of son you're going to choose to be from here on out. He sat, and for the first time in 11 days, he actually listened. I told him everything. The county filings. The 3 properties. The pattern going back 6 years. I watched the color drain out of my son's face piece by piece as the picture assembled itself in front of him. Not just what had almost happened to us, but what had already happened to 2 other families who never got the chance to stop it in time. He's done this before, Caleb said, more to himself than to me. He's done this exact thing before. 3 times that we can prove, I said. Maybe more that we can't. Caleb sat with his elbows on his knees, staring at the porch boards for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice had none of the defensiveness from the kitchen table 2 nights before. I let Mom sit in that living room alone, because a man I barely trust was talking to me about money. I've been turning that over every hour since it happened. I don't know how to fix that, Dad. I don't think I can fix that. You don't fix it, I said. You carry it, and you let it change how you show up from now on. That's the only version of fixing something like this that actually means anything. Renee called 2 days later, not Caleb. She wanted to speak to me directly, and what she told me confirmed everything the records had already shown. Her father had approached her privately about the property months earlier, testing whether she'd help encourage Caleb towards signing. She'd refused, hadn't thought much more of it, and had no idea he'd escalated to showing up at my house uninvited while I was away. She was done covering for him. She told me, and later told Caleb, that she'd be limiting contact with her parents indefinitely, and that if Russell attempted anything like this again, she'd testify to what she knew. Priya's letter reached Russell's attorney the following week. We never heard directly from Russell Hale again. No apology, no denial, nothing. Silence, the same currency I'd handed him in my kitchen. His attorney sent back a brief, careful response stating there had been a misunderstanding and that no further contact regarding the property would occur. Margaret came home from the hospital 4 days after that afternoon, her pressure stabilized, a new medication regimen, and strict instructions from her cardiologist about stress. The first night she was back, Caleb showed up unannounced with groceries and cooked dinner for both of us without being asked, something he hadn't done since he was a teenager still living under our roof. It wasn't forgiveness yet. It was the beginning of something that might become forgiveness, eventually, if he kept showing up the way he showed up that night. There was one more conversation left to have, and it was the one that mattered most. 3 weeks after that afternoon, Margaret and I sat Caleb down at the same kitchen table where all of it had started. No lawyers this time. No documents. Just the 3 of us and a pot of coffee going cold between us. I'm not signing the lake property over to anyone right now, I told him. Not because I don't trust you. Because I need to know that when it does come to you someday, it comes to you clean. No pressure, no rushed paperwork, no strangers at my table while I'm out of town. When you're ready and I'm ready, we'll do it the right way together. Caleb nodded slowly. That's fair. That's more than fair. Margaret reached across and took both our hands, hers still a little thinner than it used to be, still healing. I don't want this house to be a place people are afraid to bring hard news into, she said. I want it to be the place you run toward when something's wrong, Caleb. Not away from. He looked at both of us for a long moment, and for the first time since I'd walked through that door 11 days earlier, I saw something in my son's face that looked like the boy he used to be before life got complicated, before in-laws and property and pride got tangled up in what should have stayed simple. I want that too, he said quietly. I want to be someone you don't have to worry about walking back into a room. We didn't fix everything that night. Trust doesn't rebuild itself over one pot of coffee, and Margaret's cardiologist still checks her numbers every single week. Renee and Caleb still navigate careful, limited contact with her parents, the kind of relationship built entirely on boundaries now instead of assumptions. Russell Hale, as far as I know, has never tried anything like this with another family since, though I doubt that's because he changed. I think it's because he finally understood someone was watching closely enough to stop him. People still ask me sometimes what I actually said when I walked into that kitchen and saw my son sitting there like nothing was wrong. The truth is, I barely said anything at all. For words to send 2 strangers out of my house. 2 words to bring my son back to the table. Sit. Talk. Sometimes the loudest thing you can do to a person is stay quiet long enough to make them fill the silence themselves. That's what I did that afternoon, and 11 days later, I finally have my family back, smaller in some ways, more honest in every way that matters. If this story moved you, stay with us. There are more families, more kitchens, more quiet men who found out exactly what they were capable of when it counted. Thank you for spending this time with us. We'll see you in the next one.